I'm going to, being mindful of the time we've kept you here, I'm going to ask a couple of follow-up questions and then yield to Mr. Schock as much time as he would like, and then we'll conclude. But I want to just pick up on a couple of things that I think are important that I've heard today. And one is starting with Mr. Heenan. You mentioned the effect of the AMT and not being able to take advantage of the tax credit, of the R&D tax credit. I just want to get a poll. Has anybody else experienced that problem or know folks in their industry who have had the same issue by raise of hand, if that's clearly an issue? Mr. Heenan, do you have any suggestions how we can solve that? Or
I mean, I guess the simplest suggestion would be to carve out the R&D tax credit from the AMT. If you could allow that credit to be taken if someone's subject to AMT, then that would eliminate the problem.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that sounds very direct and reasonable. I want to follow up on also the issue that a number of people have mentioned about the expense of compliance. And I believe, Mr. Heenan, you and Mr. Ferris had also mentioned having some trouble with that. And again, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I've talked to other business owners in Hampton Roads area in my district who have said they had some trouble with that. Mr. Ferris, can you comment on how you've handled that and how big of an expense that's been for you at Blackhawk?
Well, the way we typically handle it is we've had to set up some sophisticated accounting, and we do project-related accounting that is very specific to the R&D process. So our engineers have to maintain time records, project-specific records. We have a lot of specific documentation that we have to have available for the specialists as they come in to ensure that we not only have sufficient documentation, but we put it in place for a potential IRS audit. What I've been told from our tax professionals is that this is a Tier 1 IRS topic. Consequently, every year we submit our tax filings. We feel that the R&D tax credit will be subject to review. So we go through the extra steps and consequently the extra cost to ensure that we're in compliance. For the small business person, I think they just typically avoid it because they don't want to deal with the issues, nor do they have the available cash to go through the process that's involved in ensuring that they're compliant with the IRS regulations.
I'd like to ask if any other panelists have any comments on the cost of compliance and the complexity. Yes, Mr. Heenan.
At my company, we do government contracting, so we're required by the DOD and other agencies to have a pretty robust accounting system. So it actually is not an issue for my company today. However, I've had the pleasure of working at 3 other small companies prior to this. None of them did government contracting, and all of them did a lot of research. None of them went for the R&D tax credit. And the reason was simple. We just didn't have the accounting systems robust enough to meet the IRS standard for applying for the R&D tax credit.
Okay. One more follow-up question for Mr. Ferris. We're talking about complexity. Can you make any comments about, and I understand and I've heard, I think, pretty consistently today that the permanence of the program would be a big help in planning for future years. What about the structure and the complexity of the way the tax credit is put together and the difficulty in understanding how it's set up? Do you have any comments on ways to make it easier? Would something like a flat credit for R&D be something that would be more easy to manage?
Certainly, I'm a proponent of a very simplistic approach. Again, if you're a larger company, you can rely on the expertise of professionals. They can depict the interpretation of the law. I'm a certified public accountant. I don't understand the law. Mm-hmm. I rely on our professionals to come in and help us be compliant. As a small business person, somebody that is focusing on truly innovative and thought-provoking and hopefully very significant outcomes, the last thing they want to think about is tax compliance. They're focused on technology, they're focused on product innovation, they're focused on growing their business. Consequently, we need to keep it simple. They need to understand what the net benefit is for them at the end of the day, and they should be able to scratch it on a single piece of paper rather than call up their CPA and go through a very time-consuming and sophisticated process. So I'm all about simplification. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Schoenbach, in your testimony, you suggested that one of the challenges you see from your perspective is getting the universities and the businesses together and bridging the gap between the two. And do you have any specific suggestions of ways we could make that bridge easier?
I think it requires, from our side, from a university side, I think, to be more open to the needs of the industry. That we are not an ivory tower, but that we are trying to reach out to industry and ask them what they need to do, rather than just offer them what we have. And I think that happens to a large extent now in universities. From the other side, from the industry, I think if it were a possibility to reward risks more, because it's always a risk, I think, to take a new project and over, but the payoff could be very high. If it's possible to reward risk in a certain way through incentives, and that could be tax incentives, that would probably also encourage small companies, small business to get closer to a university and try to find out what's actually available there and cross the bridge this way.
Thank you. And I have just one final question for Mr. Bendis. You began to lay out, I think, kind of an ambitious agenda of other ideas that could be very helpful to us in terms of assisting innovative small businesses. Just wondering if you could give us any ideas about specific changes to the R&D tax credit that might help us at least get halfway there.
Permanence is number one. I think one of the problems is that it's somewhat like the SBIR program, which I know the House passed out yesterday.
Right.
I think there's a little frustration amongst all of the practitioners in the United States and small businesses that they really can't plan long term on a number of items based on the temporary nature that some of these programs exist, or they're always going back for reauthorization. So there are a number of countries around the world who basically look at what the United States creates, they basically simplify it, improve upon it, and then they build it into their innovation strategy and make it permanent. Mm-hmm. So the question is, why should we continue to be the one that designs the programs, other people benefit around the world, and then we debate our own programs, which everybody agrees with are the best working in the world, and we come back and debate them every couple of years here in Congress. So permanence, I think, for these kind of programs, as well as other critical programs in the innovation portfolio, is extremely important. Simplification is another area. And that's been talked about by some other panelists. Anything that can be done to simplify the program to where a non-accounting, non-legal person can understand the legislation and whether or not they can qualify for it very quickly would be very advantageous to entrepreneurial and innovative businesses.
Great. All right. Well, again, I want to thank all of you. You've given us some really good ideas to take into account as we look at reauthorization.